The presidential suite of St. Regis Medical Pavilion lay in a hush so heavy it felt engineered, broken only by the stubborn pulse of a heart monitor fighting for space in the dark. From above, the room looked almost staged. Polished steel, low amber light, and at its center, Langston Hale, the black tech titan America once called unstoppable, lying motionless for 18 long days. Reporters said he hovered between life and death. They mourned him on morning shows. They replayed the footage of his private jet spiraling into silence, never mentioning the thin red scar carved across his temple like a warning. But what no one knew, not his doctors, not his grieving board, not even the family plotting behind glass walls, was that Langston had opened his eyes on the third day, and he kept them closed for one reason: to learn who tried to erase him and steal Hale Dynamics from his hands. If you believe truth always finds its way to the surface, stay with me and subscribe, because nothing about Langston Hale is as lifeless as it seems. Beyond the glass wall, the corridor outside Langston Hale's room felt colder than the machines keeping him alive. Sound traveled strangely here, as if the building itself were leaning in to listen. The muted hum of ventilation, the distant roll of a gurney, the soft click of designer heels, each note cut through the stillness of the presidential suite like a blade. Langston lay motionless beneath the low amber light, his body a portrait of helplessness. But inside him, something fierce burned with quiet precision. He had trained himself to breathe evenly, to mimic the fragile rhythm of a man suspended between worlds. But behind that mask, every word, every vibration on the glass was a spark landing on dry tinder. Vanessa was the first to appear, her silhouette a sharp slash against the frosted pane. She spoke in a hush that carried anyway, a thin veneer of grief wrapped around the steel beneath it. "Derek, we cannot keep stalling. The board is restless. Avery Coleman keeps asking questions." Her voice trembled, but only the practiced kind, the tremor of someone rehearsing sympathy, not feeling it. Derek joined her, adjusting the cuff of his tailored suit as though preparing for a photo op rather than a conspiracy. "One more week," he said. Each word dropped it with surgical confidence. "Just 7 days and the board will activate the incapacity clause. Hale Dynamics will need a steady hand, and I will be right there to offer it." The casual certainty in his tone made Langston's pulse throb against the machines, though his eyelids did not so much as twitch. Vanessa leaned closer to the glass as if afraid Langston might hear her, even though she was banking on the opposite. "And Avery? What if she uncovers the discrepancies in the medical reports? She's not some junior attorney we can bully. She mentored Langston. She knows him." Derek exhaled sharply, the sound full of annoyance rather than fear. "Avery won't be a problem. I've already planted enough fabricated documents in her office to trigger an ethics investigation. By the end of the week, she'll be too busy fighting for her license to question anything about your husband." He paused, allowing the venom of his plan to settle. "Everything is under control." Inside the room, Langston kept his breath steady, a man sculpted from stone. But behind the facade, his heart tightened like a fist closing around truth. The ache wasn't from the injury carved across his temple. It was from hearing the people nearest to him rewrite the narrative of his life with the ease of changing a headline. Each sentence from them fell like a hammer driving in a nail. And with every nail, a new truth sharpened. The jet crash had never been an accident. Someone had orchestrated it. Someone he once called family. He let the revelation settle in his chest like a weight he refused to drop. Helpless on the surface, he listened, sharp, focused, storing every word, because power could take many forms. And right now, his greatest power was silence, the kind that waits, watches, and prepares to strike back. The next time the door eased open, it didn't slice the air like it had when doctors or administrators entered. This time, the room shifted, warmed, as if someone had brought a breath of color into a world painted in grayscale. Her footsteps were soft, measured, barely indenting the hush. And before Langston ever saw her, he sensed her, an understated presence wrapped in the faintest trace of lavender drifting through the sterile cold. It didn't belong in a place like this, which was exactly why it caught him like a spark in a snowstorm. She moved around the room with a calm rhythm, not the performative gentleness of someone tending to a patient they believed could not hear, but with the controlled confidence of someone who understood every machine, every line on every monitor. Wires trembled lightly as she adjusted them. The heart monitor steadied beneath her touch. The IV line clicked softly as she examined it. Even her breath had a cadence that contrasted the mechanical beeping, hinting that she was the only living thing in the room truly awake. "Good evening, Mr. Hale," she said, not with pity, not with that syrupy tone others dripped onto him, but with a quiet professionalism that felt startlingly honest. She studied the readings, her brows drawing together with controlled suspicion as she flipped through the electronic charts. Something in her demeanor cooled the room again. "These sedation levels," she murmured, half to herself, "they're unusually high." Langston felt a tremor inside him, a spark of recognition, of hope. She hadn't brushed past the irregularities. She had seen them immediately. She moved to the foot of his bed, her steps light, but her presence unmistakably anchored now. When she finally spoke again, her voice was lower, layered with tension and something dangerously close to confession. "I shouldn't say this," she whispered, "but your reflex reports don't match your clinical profile. Someone has altered them." Her fingers hesitated on the edge of the chart, just long enough for Langston to know she was making a choice that couldn't be undone. She leaned closer. "And I need you to understand something," she continued, her tone shifting, firmer, sharper, colder than the lavender softness she'd brought into the room. "I'm not just a night nurse. My real work was with the FBI's Forensic Neurology Division, which means I know exactly what I'm looking at." The temperature in the room felt suddenly unstable. Mechanical shadows flickered across the walls. This woman, this stranger who moved like quiet light, had just stepped directly into a conspiracy she didn't even know existed. "And whatever is happening to you, Mr. Hale," she said, her voice dropping to a vow, "is not medical negligence. It's deliberate." Langston kept still, but inside him, that tightly controlled fire surged, hungry. "I don't know who would do this," she admitted, "or why, but I intend to find out, and I'll protect you, even if it costs me my job, my license, or worse." For the first time since the crash, hope didn't feel like a distant theory. It had a voice now. It had lavender on its skin. It had a name he didn't yet know, but would soon learn to trust more than anyone left in his world. On the third night, long after the hallway lights dimmed to their ghostly blue, and the nurse's station fell into a hush, something shifted in the room. It was small at first, so small it might have been imagined, the faintest twitch beneath the sterile white sheet. Maya had been adjusting the monitor leads, her movements careful, her breath even, but she froze mid-motion, eyes narrowing. There it was again, a deliberate flick of Langston Hale's index finger. The air tightened, as though the walls understood the significance before either of them spoke. Maya leaned in, her pulse flickering in her throat, her voice barely a thread. "Mr. Hale, was that you?" The finger moved once more, a tiny defiance against the prison of stillness. For a moment, shock flickered across her face, but it melted quickly into something sharper, resolve. She checked the door, closed the blinds, and drew nearer until her shadow merged with his. "We need a system," she whispered. "If you can move, even a little, we can communicate without anyone noticing." She held up her hand like a conductor preparing an orchestra. "One movement for yes, two for no. Blink once if you agree." A single slow blink. Agreement. From that point forward, the dimly lit room transformed into a secret war room. Every night when the clinic settled into its artificial sleep, Maya returned with a small stack of laminated letter cards she'd smuggled inside her coat. She spread them on a tray, shifting them gently as Langston guided her with painstaking precision. A blink when she hovered over the right card, a twitch when she paused too long. Piece by piece, letter by letter, his first message scraped its way into the open. "They sabotaged my plane." When the final letter fell into place, Maya's hand trembled, not from fear, but from the magnitude of what he had just confirmed. She steadied herself and asked the question that hovered like smoke. "Who, Mr. Hale?" This time he didn't spell it. He didn't need to. One blink for Vanessa, a second blink for Derek. Her breath caught as she understood the scale of the betrayal, his own family circling his empire like vultures, ready to tear Hale Dynamics apart and kill Project Aurora before it ever reached the communities that needed it most. Maya closed the blinds tighter and lowered her voice to a whisper, meant only for him. "If they're willing to sedate you to keep you silent, they'll come after anyone who gets too close. That includes me." His finger lifted again, an inch of movement carrying the weight of a man who had built an empire from nothing. It wasn't a command. It wasn't a plea. It was trust. And something in Maya hardened with that. "We do this together," she said. "I'm not walking away." From that night on, she moved through the clinic like a shadow with a purpose. She hacked into the internal security cameras, looping footage with a subtle confidence born from her FBI days, ensuring no one, not Derek, not Dr. Lauron, not any of the watchful administrators, could track her visits or notice the small but unmistakable signs of Langston's awakening. Every whispered exchange, every stolen minute of practice, every letter spelled out under the cover of darkness. It all added up to a single truth. Langston Hale was no longer a silent victim in a bed. He was a man rebuilding his strength, gathering intelligence, and preparing for the moment the world would learn he had never been as powerless as they wanted him to be. The countdown began without anyone saying a word. It was there in the way the building breathed at night, in the way security cameras rotated a little too slowly, in the way the fluorescent lights flickered above Derek Hale's polished shoes as he stalked through the clinic halls. A week. That was all he needed to convince the board that Langston's mind was gone forever. 7 days to cement a lie into corporate law. 7 days before Hale Dynamics slipped into his hands. But he wasn't the only one racing the clock. Maya Ellison moved through the shadows with a purpose sharpened by fear and conviction. She kept her hair tied back, her badge in place, her expression neutral. The perfect night nurse, the perfect ghost. But behind the facade, she tracked every movement, every visitor, every suspicious alteration in Langston's digital records. That was how she found herself pressing against a cold steel corner one night, her phone held low as Derek's voice drifted down the hallway like a toxin. "Prepare the final report," he ordered, his tone clipped, impatient. "I want documented evidence of irreversible brain damage, enough to trigger the incapacitation clause without question." Dr. Keaton Lauren exhaled shakily. "I've already altered the reflex scans, but the nurse keeps asking questions." "Then find a way to silence her," Derek snapped. "1 week, Lauron. After that, this company is mine." Maya captured every word, every breath, every damning tone with her phone angled at her hip. When Derek's footsteps faded, she sprinted back to Langston's room, adrenaline charging her pulse. Inside, Langston was already working. He had begun pushing his body in small, invisible increments. A flex of his thigh, a controlled curl of his fingers, the faint lift of his neck from the pillow for half a second before gravity reclaimed him. Each movement was a rebellion, a declaration that he refused to die in the space his family carved out for him. She leaned close. "They're preparing to declare you permanently impaired. We're running out of time." His eyelid fluttered, and the tension in his jaw shifted, tiny signals that felt louder than any shout. Maya turned to the stack of papers she had stolen earlier that evening, scanning them again under the dim light. Something had bothered her from the start, the fingerprints on the amended reports. Too clean, too aligned. When she magnified them on her phone, her suspicion snapped into certainty. "They're synthetic," she whispered, horrified. "Artificial fingerprints. None of these documents would stand in court. They were manufactured." That discovery ignited the next step. She called Avery Coleman from a supply closet, whispering so quietly that her words barely shaped themselves. "Avery, they're framing you. They're altering records. You need to protect yourself. And I need you prepared to defend Langston when this breaks." Avery didn't ask how Maya knew. She simply said, "Send me everything." But even with Avery in play, Maya knew they needed unimpeachable medical proof. Someone Lauron couldn't intimidate or buy. Enter Dr. Sora Chen. A forensic neurologist with a reputation for torching corruption, Chen arrived under the guise of a visitor and slipped into Langston's room with the efficiency of a scalpel. She scanned the machines, reviewed the charts, and examined Langston with tools so discreet they could have been toys. Her expression hardened with each passing minute. Finally, she stepped back. "There is no sign of neurological degeneration," she said. "The sedation levels recorded here are criminal. He is being kept in this state deliberately." Maya felt her throat constrict. Langston, hearing the verdict he already suspected, held his breath steady, but inside, the fury sharpened into something cold and strategic. Chen closed her case. "We need evidence that cannot be erased, and we need it before the board meets. Whatever the game is here, it's bigger than a family power grab. Be ready." The room fell into a thick silence, humming with the electricity of a war no one else knew was coming. The countdown was no longer 7 days. It had become one mission: gather enough truth to bring an empire of lies crashing down. The boardroom of Hale Dynamics Tower felt less like a center of innovation and more like a courtroom awaiting its verdict. The lights were too bright, the air too still, and every polished surface reflected the tension that clung to the room like smoke. 12 board members sat in a perfect semicircle, their immaculate suits forming a quiet wall of authority. The scrape of a chair leg, the sharp fold of a document, the echo of footsteps across marble floors. Each sound landed with the weight of a gavel striking. Derek Hale stepped forward with the poise of a man accepting an award, rather than orchestrating a coup. He placed a thick folder at the center of the long table, spreading the pages as though laying out a map of inevitable tragedy. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, voice low, rehearsed, benevolent. "I wish I weren't the one bringing this news. But the medical reports leave us no choice. My brother, Langston, has suffered irreversible brain death." He paused, letting the words sink in. They dropped like stones into water, rippling outward in shock and pity. Vanessa dabbed at her eyes with a silk handkerchief, carefully, theatrically, making sure her trembling hand was visible to everyone at the table. "He held on as long as he could," she whispered, playing the grieving widow with flawless precision. "But he's not coming back." For a moment, the room bought it. Heads bowed, breaths hitched, pens stilled. The performance was airtight, the narrative airtight, the documents airtight, or so they believed. Everyone except Elizabeth Hancock. She sat near the far end of the table, one hand on her pen, the other casually hovering near her phone. Her expression was unreadable, but her eyes, sharp, seasoned, impossible to fool, moved back and forth between Derek and Vanessa with quiet suspicion. She had known Langston too long, known his discipline, his health, his instincts, known that nothing about this timing felt right. Under the table, her thumb pressed record. While the boardroom descended into orchestrated mourning, miles away the world inside a dim hospital suite was shifting. Dr. Sora Chen lowered her portable scanner, her brows lifting in a mixture of relief and disbelief. His reflexes are returning, muscle tone is intact, cognitive response is present. He's stronger than he looks. Her voice carried a spark of victory. He can stand, not for long yet, but long enough. Maya felt her pulse slam against her ribs. For days she had lived on adrenaline and instinct, fighting a silent war for a man who could barely lift a finger. Now, for the first time, she felt the momentum turn. She leaned close to him, her voice a whisper and a dare. "Are you ready?" Langston Hale, the man the world believed was trapped between life and death, opened his eyes fully. No fluttering, no hesitation. A storm lived behind them. Not rage, not fear, but clarity. The kind that comes from being hunted and choosing to hunt back. He exhaled once, then braced his hands against the mattress. Every muscle trembled, as though waking from a winter that lasted centuries. Maya supported his elbow. Dr. Chen adjusted the frame of the bed. And slowly, agonizingly slowly, Langston rose, first to a seated position, then to a stand. The machines hummed around him, almost in disbelief. In that moment, he wasn't a patient. He wasn't a victim. He was a man reclaiming his life, inch by inch, against a conspiracy designed to bury him alive. If you're holding your breath, waiting for truth to break through the lies, drop a comment so the algorithm knows you're still here. Back in the boardroom, Derek straightened his tie and prepared the final speech that would crown him acting CEO. The vote was moments away. Everything was unfolding exactly as he planned, which is why the sound that echoed from the doorway, polished shoes striking marble in deliberate, steady cadence, froze every person in the room. Because the footsteps were familiar, because the rhythm was unmistakable, because dead men aren't supposed to walk into board meetings. But Langston Hale was done playing dead. The vote was seconds away. Derek stood at the head of the table, one hand on the resolution that would crown him acting CEO, the other raised in a gesture of solemn leadership he'd practiced in the mirror. The board leaned forward, pens ready. Vanessa shifted subtly, angling herself so her expression of dignified sorrow could be admired from every seat. Everything was falling into place. Everything was his. And then the door opened. Not a timid knock, not a polite turn of the handle. It opened with the slow, decisive weight of inevitability. Chairs scraped, papers stilled, every head lifted at once. Langston Hale stepped through the doorway, framed by the bright hallway light as though he were emerging from another world. He moved with a calm that felt ancient, steadying himself lightly on a dark ebony cane that struck the marble floor with a resonant tap. His suit, midnight navy, fit him like armor. And although weeks of forced sedation had carved shadows beneath his eyes, there was fire behind them, controlled, intelligent, alive. Vanessa's hand jerked. Her glass slipped before she even registered it. It hit the table with a crystalline crack that ricocheted around the room. Water spilled across her documents, washing away her grief like cheap makeup. She didn't blink, couldn't. Derek's mouth hung open for one heartbeat too long. Then his composure snapped into place with the brittle precision of glass under pressure. This is impossible. You're in a coma. Langston's voice cut through the space like a clean blade. It seems your medical sources were unreliable. Before Derek could regain footing, a second figure stepped into the room. Diana Coleman, dressed in charcoal gray, jaw set, her black leather briefcase in hand like she'd been waiting years for this exact moment. "Members of the board," she said, "before you take any vote today, you'll want to review some documents." She snapped the briefcase open, and the sound echoed like a judge's gavel. She laid out sheets one by one, wire transfers leading to offshore accounts under Derek's control, payment trails ending with Dr. Keaton Lauron, encrypted messages referencing a permanent solution to the Aurora obstacle. Each page added another nail to the coffin Derek had built for himself. But Diana wasn't finished. Maya Ellison stepped forward next, a tablet in hand. She tapped the screen, and the room filled with the tinny audio of a recorded hallway conversation. Derek's voice, unmistakable. "Keep him sedated until after the vote. Then nature can take its course. A coma this long, no one will question it." Gasps rippled through the room in a wave. A board member swore under his breath. Another pushed back from the table, as though distance could shield her from implication. Elizabeth Hancock rose slowly, fury sharpening every word. "Mr. Hale, Derek, Vanessa, you owe this board an explanation." But Langston wasn't looking at Derek. He stepped closer to Vanessa, gaze pinned to the bare ring finger she kept trying to hide beneath her sleeve. "Tell me, Vanessa," he said quietly, "is your wedding ring in your purse today? Or has it already been pawned?" The question sliced straight through the performance she'd so carefully crafted. Her mask cracked. The silence she offered as an answer was louder than any confession. Security arrived at the doorway, summoned by Elizabeth's gesture. Two officers moved to flank Derek and Vanessa. Derek lurched back, panic blotting out every hint of composure. "You don't understand," he shouted as they seized his arms. "Aurora will destroy half the legacy energy contracts in this country. Billions lost. Entire sectors collapse. This wasn't just my plan. There are people above me, powerful people, and they're not going to let this go." That admission did more than reveal motive. It exposed scale, a conspiracy that stretched far beyond family greed, beyond corporate betrayal, into the veins of national infrastructure. Vanessa tried to wrench free, her voice thin with disbelief. "You said we would be untouchable." Derek laughed, a wild cracking sound. "We were, until he refused to die." Langston stood unmoving as they were dragged out, the storm inside him finally settling into stillness. He didn't need to raise his voice. He didn't need theatrics. His presence alone had rewritten the entire script, because the man they tried to bury had walked back into the room, not restored, not resurrected, but reborn into someone far more dangerous than the version they had tried to kill. 6 months later, Hale Dynamics looked nothing like the company that had nearly been stolen. The tension, the coldness, the shadow of betrayal, all of it had been burned away by something brighter. Outside the tower's glass walls, the rooftop glittered under a wide summer sky, its surface transformed into a field of sleek solar panels humming with quiet promise. And far below, in neighborhoods long forgotten by city planners, the first homes powered by the Aurora Initiative glowed late into the night. In one school on the south side, children spilled into a classroom lit by clean, steady energy that cost almost nothing. Their laughter carried through the halls as they clustered around laptops they'd never been able to power reliably before. A teacher held up the most recent utility bill to the camera, shaking her head in disbelief. 78% gone, erased, lifted off the backs of families who had spent decades choosing between electricity and groceries. Hope didn't just flicker, it burned. Inside the headquarters, investors, once skittish and whispering about collapse, now packed the boardroom with renewed confidence. Hale Dynamics stock had risen 42% since the national rollout of Aurora, proving something Wall Street rarely admits. Doing good does not mean losing ground. Sometimes it means building a future people actually want to buy into. Avery Coleman walked into Langston's office with her new ID badge clipped neatly to her blazer, Chief Legal Officer. The title suited her. Integrity fit her like armor. Langston rose from his desk when she entered, greeting her with the quiet respect of someone who knew exactly what she risked to stay loyal when the world turned dark. "Ready for round 2?" she asked. "Already writing it," he said, tapping the stack of reforms she'd helped him draft. But the real heart of the transformation rested not in contracts or board votes, but in a glass-walled conference room, one floor below, where a new foundation was being unveiled. The Hale Ellison Foundation for Medical Ethics. A sleek logo glowed across the screen, Hale on the left, Ellison on the right. Two names bound together by survival, truth, and a promise kept in the quiet of a hospital room. Maya stood at the back, eyes widening when she saw her name woven into the emblem. She hadn't asked for recognition. She had never expected it. But Langston turned toward her with a small, knowing smile. "You save more than my life," he said. "You saved this company from becoming something dark. Your name deserves to be part of what we build next." Justice had already made its rounds. Vanessa Hale received 8 years. Derek Hale, 15. Dr. Lauron lost his license and awaited additional sentencing. But Langston wasn't interested in celebrating the downfall of the people who betrayed him. His focus had shifted somewhere else entirely, to the communities Aurora could lift, to the patients the foundation could protect, to the future he could help shape with the second chance he had stolen back. That was why, when the press gathered later that afternoon, Langston announced a new initiative, full-ride STEM scholarships for Black and minority students across the country, funds to help the next generation build, code, invent, and rise beyond the ceilings that had once trapped him. "We don't just rebuild," he said into the microphone. "We rise. And when we rise, we bring others with us." Sunlight poured into the room as he spoke, catching the edge of the Hale Ellison logo, refracting into warm streaks of gold across the polished floor. And for the first time since the crash, since the betrayal, since the hospital walls threatened to swallow him whole, Langston felt the weight on his chest lift, not because the fight was over, but because he finally knew what he was fighting for. 6 months of peace can make the world feel safe again, but danger rarely disappears. It simply learns to whisper. The first whisper came to Elizabeth Hancock in the form of a collect call from state prison. She almost didn't answer, but something, intuition, obligation, unfinished business, made her swipe across the screen. "Elizabeth," Derek's voice crackled through the receiver, thinner now, stripped of arrogance. "I want to make a deal." She didn't speak, she didn't need to. Derek filled the silence like a man drowning and reaching for anything that resembled air. "You think this was just me and Vanessa?" he said. "You think I had the power to pull all of that off alone? No. There are people behind this, real players, entire legacy energy groups who saw Aurora as a threat. They funded it, directed it, promised protection, and now they're coming for me because I failed. If I talk, they'll come for all of you." A chill slid down Elizabeth's spine, but her voice stayed steady. "You'll have to bring that to Langston yourself." A sharp laugh, half bitter, half terrified. "He won't see me." He was right. Langston Hale rejected the meeting within minutes. "Sir, he claims to have information that could—" "The truth," Langston said calmly, "has a way of surfacing on its own." He closed the folder, ending the conversation. He made his choices, now he lives with them. It wasn't indifference, it was clarity, the kind forged in darkness, sharpened by survival. Later that afternoon, Langston and Maya walked side by side through the newly opened Aurora Research Center. The space felt alive, sunlit labs, open workstations, teams of young scientists from every background, every corner of the country. The kind of team Langston once dreamed of building, but had never dared to believe he could attract. Now they moved through the halls with purpose, designing cleaner grids, cheaper batteries, smarter networks. Maya watched them with quiet awe. "They're not afraid," she said, "not of failing, not of being underestimated, not of the world telling them what they can't do." Langston nodded. When a company learns what it stands for, people learn what they can become. He paused beside the central lobby wall, where a new plaque had been mounted, glass, etched with a single quote. "True strength isn't measured by how much power you hold, but by how you use it when everything you built is threatened." Maya's breath caught. She recognized the words instantly. They were hers, spoken months ago in a dim hospital room to a man the world believed was slipping away. Langston reached for her hand, grounding her in the moment. "Power means nothing," he said softly. if it doesn't serve people who need it. She squeezed his hand back, and for a moment, amid the hum of innovation and the glow of possibility, it felt like the future had finally steadied itself. But somewhere in a federal prison cell, Derek Hale stared at the concrete wall, whispering names, events, secrets, pieces of a much larger machine that had tried to bury Langston long before the jet ever crashed. And that machine was still turning, waiting, watching, preparing its next move. Because the story wasn't over, not even close. In the end, Langston's story was never just about a man rising from a hospital bed. It was about a life reclaimed in the very moment others tried to erase it. A journey that began in forced silence and ended with a vision powerful enough to reshape entire communities. From the dim confines of a private clinic to the bright rooftops, crowned with Aurora's solar fields, he proved that sometimes the world changes because one person refuses to stay buried. And in that long stretch of darkness, when every breath felt stolen and every truth felt distant, Langston discovered something deeper than survival. He learned that in our darkest hours, when the world tries to strip us of identity and purpose, that is when our true selves take shape. Not despite the suffering, but through it. Now Aurora stands on the edge of expansion across 3 continents, carrying his new philosophy in every watt of energy it delivers. Power means nothing until it serves those who have none. If you believe that strength can rise from pain and purpose can be born from the shadows, like, subscribe, and comment to help Black Soul Stories continue sharing these journeys of resilience and rebirth.